You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 15.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook of your choice and a 30-day free trial by visiting borntokickarse.com/audible. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. To download your free audiobook today, go to borntokickarse.com/audible. Again, that's borntokickarse.com/audible for your free audiobook. Do you know someone or know of someone who walks the walk and would like to hear them on the Born to Kick Arse podcast? They can be from any field, but they need to have an inspiring story that will help to motivate others to achieve their own goals. If you do, please head over to borntokickarse.com/suggest a guest and fill out the form. We'd love to hear from you. Sarah Williams is an author, blogger, podcaster, and marathon runner. Sarah has recently completed one of the toughest foot races on earth, the Marathon de Sables. The MDS is a 6-day, 251-kilometre multi-day stage race through southern Morocco in the Sahara Desert, where temperatures often top 50 degrees centigrade. Sarah talks about what it takes to complete one of the world's most grueling adventures. Enjoy the interview. Hi Sarah, it's Matt here from the Born to Kick Arse podcast. Thanks for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
So can you tell us a bit about yourself? I know you've run the London Marathon a number of times. You've recently come back, you've recently completed the one of the toughest foot races on earth, the Marathon de Sables. But before we sort of do a deep dive into those things, can you give us a background on yourself, where you grew up and, you know, what were your interests growing up?
Absolutely. So my name is Sarah Williams and I am based on the Wirral in the UK. So right by the coast, gorgeous little coastal town, by the sand and the sea. Grew up in a sporty family with both parents. My dad used to play rugby. My mum used to be very active as well. I've got an older brother, a younger sister. I love playing lacrosse. I like playing hockey when I was younger. And then after going to university, I continued with the lacrosse, but I think the social side of things sort of took over and I sort of let my fitness slide, should we say. And then I just sort of didn't really know what I wanted to do, didn't think about it much. And all my friends moved down to London. So I thought I might as well move down to London as well. Ended up moving down to London, got a graduate job, started working in banking. And then my life was basically over. And I spent, 12-hour days, sat behind a desk, sat behind computer screens, 2 or 3 phones on the go. And it was long hours. It was crazy busy. It was demanding. It was stressful. It was sucking the life out of me. And I basically got to the point where I thought, is this what I want to do anymore? And eventually I thought, I don't think I can do this. And I just made the decision to quit my job. And that was in 2013. And then ever since then, it has been this crazy journey of backpacking around South America, heading off to Africa to climb Kilimanjaro, heading off to Australia. I also climbed your highest mountain, Mount Kosciuszko.
Yeah.
And just doing sort of challenges and I started my own company, which was called Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating and inspiring women and girls. And I do various different things. So I've written a few books. I have a blog. I have a podcast. I do TV work. I do everything.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, I just want to rewind back to I guess, the moment where you decided to pull the plug on your professional job, your professional career as a banker. Did you have any hesitation that you were going to pull the plug? Were you worried about, diving into the unknown?
Sure, I think there was that element of fear, but it was quite interesting actually. This morning on my Facebook feed, it comes up with this reminder of what you were doing 6 years ago, and my update was, it's been another tough day at the office, only leaving work now, and it was 10:30. And looking back, I'm thinking, wow. But I think almost before I actually made the final decision, I knew something wasn't quite right. I knew I needed something else in my life. I just wasn't getting that sense of satisfaction. So I ended up doing a lot of stuff outside of my job. So I started running marathons as something to do. So I ended up running the London Marathon 5 times. I started doing more charity work, and I especially was focused in on women and promoting women. So I was working for UN Women in London. I was a sponsor for Women International. So I was doing all these sort of extracurricular stuff because I just wasn't getting what I needed from my job. And I don't think I realized how unhappy it was making me, and also how stressed I actually was. And so by the time it came to actually making that decision, I think the decision had been made over like a year and a half, 2 years while I went through this process. So actually, once that decision was made and it was suddenly like, I'm off, I finished, there was a sense of relief, and it was like, as this weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But then I think after that, I went off and I went traveling, and I didn't really have a purpose. I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do, and which was great for about 9 months, 12 months to a year. But then after that, I started to feel a bit lost, because it was like, well, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I can't continue just, traveling and having a wonderful time. I actually needed a purpose and something to do. So I think it was very, very difficult, because what I realized, that I never actually stopped to think about what it is that I wanted to do. What was I passionate about? What was I interested in? What did I actually want to achieve? And I think I just almost followed in the footsteps of everybody else, to almost what my parents expected me to do, what my friends were doing. And it all just seemed like the logical thing to do. Go to university, leave university, you get a graduate job, you move to London, you start in the rat race, you get professional qualifications, you move up the career ladder, you get promoted, you work hard, you play hard. But I'd never actually taken the time to really think about what I wanted to do. How did I want to spend my time? And actually taking that time out and spending 4 months backpacking around South America was fantastic, because it gave me quiet time to actually think about me and almost be a little bit selfish and think, okay, what do I want to do?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, most people are, I guess, have you seen the movie The Matrix?
The Matrix, yeah, absolutely.
It's like that. People are, it's just the way society is. People are, caught up in the 9-to-5 routine, day in, day out. And then next thing you know, years have passed, decades have passed, and life seems to have slipped them by.
Yeah.
But you mentioned you've run the London Marathon 5 times. Were you always a runner, or how did you get into that?
Well, there was two times I started running. The first time was after I graduated university. I had put on a huge amount of weight. It was ridiculous. I think I spent the final 6 weeks just partying every night. And it got to a point I had these knee-high boots. I couldn't even zip up my knee-high boots. I put on so much weight. So after I graduated and left, it was the summer, and I thought, right, need to start running. So I booked myself a half marathon for the end of the summer, and I just ran throughout the summer, did my half marathon, shifted the weight, and then moved to London and promptly sort of forgot about running. And the second time I sort of got into running more was while I was working in London. I got to that point where I had a week to go before payday. And I was thinking, I didn't have any money. Like, I am completely and utterly broke. But I'd paid for my rent, I'd I've got all my food at the house. I paid all my bills. I paid for everything. The only thing I needed to pay for was my transport. And I was thinking, I can't actually afford, I can't remember, it was £60 or whatever it was for the week. And I was thinking, well, how am I going to get to work? And at that point, I only lived about 3 miles from work. So it was quite a quick tube journey or quite a quick bus journey. But it was also relatively easy to run it. And so I was thinking, well, I could just put my backpack on, take a shirt and a skirt, a little bit of makeup with me. I've got a towel. We've got showers at the office, and I could run to work. And that's what I did. So Monday through to Friday, woke up in the morning, put my running kit on, ran to work, ran home from work. And to be honest, I thought I was going to hate it, because I was like, oh, this is so depressing. I'm meant to be living this dream, and I can't even afford to get myself to work apart from using my 2 legs. But actually what I found was I really enjoyed it. I felt just really accomplished and liberated. And I was getting into work for maybe 7:30 in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd be showered and changed and sat at my desk. And I'd accomplish so much in that hour and a half, an hour before everybody else was arriving, that I was just starting to be super, super productive. And it started to create all these good habits. And so I continued it, especially during the summer months. It was fantastic. I had a beautiful run down High Street, Kent. I used to try and, beat the buses, and my times gradually got quicker and quicker and quicker. And it was just what I found. It was just a really great way to start the day. And that's how I really sort of got into running. It was more sort of a necessity than actually wanting to run.
Yeah. Yeah, the more you sort of get into it, especially with like the run commuting to and from work, your mindset, your mind gets clearer, your energy increases, throughout the day. You don't need as much caffeine, maybe. Now, you've just come back from Morocco.
I have.
Can you tell us about that? I really want to, I've got a whole heap of questions that I'd love to ask you. Because, this is one of the things on my to-do list. But, can you tell us about your recent trip to Morocco that you've just come back from?
Oh, absolutely. So a couple of years ago, I actually heard about this race, and it was called the Marathon de Sables, which is French for Marathon of the Sands. And it's been billed as the toughest foot race on earth. It's a multi-stage ultra endurance race where you are self-sufficient and you carry everything you need on your back, and you're running through the Sahara Desert. So it's an absolutely crazy race. It's 257 kilometers, 160 miles, tons and tons of sand and sand dunes. And it is a tough ultra endurance race. And I made the decision sort of a year and a half ago, because I do a lot of talking at girls' schools, and I talk about motivation and challenge and change and getting outside your comfort zone, and how you've got to have big dreams and, really go after them. And I thought, well, it's been quite a while since you've done anything that scared you and really got you outside your own comfort zone. And I thought, well, what is the biggest, scariest race that I could do? And it was the Marathon de Sables I just kept coming back to. I liked the idea of having to pit myself against the elements to do this ultra hard race. And that's one of the reasons I decided to do it. So, an incredible race.
Just with that, does the distance increase every year on that?
I don't know. I think it's normally around sort of 250 kilometers or so. And it's basically sort of like a similar structure. So the first 3 days are around 34 kilometers to around 42 kilometers. So sort of in between that. Then you have this long stage, which is like a double marathon. So we did 52 miles, so 83 kilometers. Then you have a rest day. Then you have a marathon day. And then you have a final day, which is like a non-timed charity stage, which in our case was around 17 kilometers. So the route does change every year, and I think sometimes it does get tougher and tougher and tougher. I was actually chatting with a guy called Rory Coleman, who's a bit of a UK legend when it comes to the Marathon des Sables. He's actually done it 13 times, and I passed him on the first day this year, and he was just saying, this is brutal. We've never had a day one like this. They normally sort of ease you into it, apparently. Not in this case. It was sand dunes on sand dunes on sand dunes for the first 15 kilometers. Absolutely sort of almost soul destroying if you're not sort of used to that and haven't trained for it.
Yeah, with the training, I just want to sort of rewind a bit prior to the start of the race. Were you based in? How did you train for this? Because did you specifically? Were you near a beach at all where you could do hours running through the sand, or how did you approach your training?
Well, I actually broke my training down into two parts. So I thought the first part is it's all about building strength and getting strong and fit and getting lean, because you want to try and lose as much fat as possible so you're not sort of insulated when you're out in the desert. So I've been doing a lot of strength training over the past 2 years, but I started a specific program with a personal trainer, which was very based on building on leg strength, building core strength, and also shoulder strength. Because when you're carrying a backpack, and my backpack weighed 7.5 kilograms, what can happen when you get tired is your shoulders can start to sort of roll forward, and it can start to affect your posture, which will then impact on your running. So I wanted to be as strong and as powerful as possible. So the first 6 months was strength training. And when I got to January, I've actually got family in Australia and they live in Melbourne. And I got this opportunity to go and train over there. And I was thinking, now, do I want to spend 3 months in the UK where it's grey skies, it's the middle of winter, it's cold, it's raining, when I'm having to run 5 times a week, heading out for, 10, 12, 15, 20-mile runs and spending, 6 or 7 hours walking? Or would I rather be in Australia where the sun is shining, it's by the coast? So I actually came to Australia for my phase 2, which was the endurance phase. And that was running 5 times a week. It was doing speed work. It was spending time on feet. And that was fantastic, because not only did I get to train in the heat, but I was also based close to the beach as well. So I was doing coastal runs and I was getting out into the sand. The one thing I didn't do was hill training, and there wasn't really many sand dunes around me, but I would run in the sand at every opportunity.
Yeah. Did you do like any full dress rehearsals where you would like have your actual pack loaded up with weight?
Well, absolutely. So when I started running, I actually did have my backpack, which was a Raid Light Ulma 20, and it's got sort of 2 water bottles in the front. You can carry a water bottle in the back of it. And I would always run with my pack. I mean, partly because I wanted my pack to get molded to my body. I wanted to get used to it, because if you haven't run with a pack before, it can be very, very strange. So I was always running with a pack, and I would gradually increase the weight until my final long session, or my final sort of weekend, where I went running for 4.5 hours on the Saturday and then walking for 7 hours, was with a weighted pack. And it was quite interesting, because I think a lot of people hadn't trained with their pack, because I'd be looking around and my pack was almost quite destroyed by the time I got to the race, whereas other people were rocking up with these brand new beautiful backpacks, never been used. And I was just thinking, oh, I think that's a bit of an error. But mine like fitted like a glove. It felt super comfortable. I'm so used to running with a pack, I actually find it really strange when I don't have one on my back.
Now, with the entry, is there a big wait list? Do you have to wait years to get in, or is it pretty straightforward? You can get in sort of, the next year. What's the process there?
I think most people do it in about maybe like a year or 2 years in advance, just because of the cost of the race. So the race is around £3,600, so around like $8,000. But I mean, what I found is when I applied, I decided in the September that I wanted to do the race, actually the year before, September 2014. And I emailed them and was put on a wait list, and then somebody dropped out, because what you find is people do end up dropping out, or people get injured. So places for, say, one person do become available. There's just obviously no guarantee for that.
Now, with the gear, do they have a mandatory gear list? Like a whole heap of stuff, like mandatory safety gear, a big checklist of stuff that you had to have medical wise. Was there a minimum amount of fluids that you had to carry and stuff like that?
Yeah, so they did have a set kit list. So you obviously had to have a backpack. You had to, what else do you have? You had to carry a signaling mirror, a whistle, a lighter. You also needed to carry a venom pump as well in case you got bitten by snakes while you were over there. Um, they also provided you with like a tracker, so that they attached to your backpack, so people at home would actually be able to track you while you were running. So I thought that was really, really awesome. In previous years, they've had flares for people to, to carry in case they got lost. They could set off a flare. So I think the technology's moved on and improved. With regards to water, now the water is actually rationed, and what it is you'd start each day with maybe 1.5 litres or 3 litres of water, depending on what your first stage was going to be. And as you went through every checkpoint, you'd either be given 1.5 litres or 3 litres of water to carry. And at the very end of the day, you'd be given 4 litres of water. Now, there's enough water there. They cater basically, if you're a large guy, there'll be enough water for a large guy. So because I'm more of like a petite woman, then I wasn't actually drinking all of my water. So, but the water management is actually really important, because because I'd been training in the heat, I got very used to going out and drinking a lot of water. So every day I'd be drinking maybe 4.5 litres of water, and my body had almost got used to drinking that much. Whereas I remember on the first day when we were out there, like one of my tent mates, she just couldn't drink that much water because she hadn't almost trained herself to be drinking it. And so she was struggling to drink and keep hydrated. So the water management is hugely important. I mean, the other thing that happened is, on the first day, I mentioned about these sand dunes, these rolling hills just going on forever. And you get to the top of the sand dune, you'd be thinking, oh, is there another checkpoint? And you wouldn't be able to see a checkpoint. And you go down another sand dune, up the next one, looking again for a checkpoint, no checkpoint. And if you hadn't managed your water, and if you drunk it all too quickly, you could end up going for like 7, 10, 15 kilometers with no water, which is incredibly difficult to do. So it's a real balancing act, and you need to really have trained yourself around the water.
Yeah. Just with the navigation on the actual course, I know some of the ultras I've done have, like ribbons or markers, or they might have spray painted on the ground. If there's like a fork in the road, they might sort of put a big X on the ground that tells you not to go that particular way. How were there any sort of markers that the officials put out at all? Like because it's a desert, I'm thinking probably not. How do you navigate?
No. Well, what you get given is you get given a road book at the very start, and it's sort of, and you go through and there's detailed instructions. So like 117 degrees, go east for 10 kilometers. And then they also have a drawing of it as well. So this is sand dunes, or this is the Jebels, or, this is the flat points. This is each checkpoint. But they did have markers, but it wasn't like a normal race. So they'd be like every kilometer or something. You'd be able to sort of see them in the distance. And what you'd find is the elite runners, generally the Moroccans, would be off and would be running. And then sort of, the people would then sort of snake backwards. So generally, you'd never be alone. You could always look up and see a sort of a person in front of you. So it was actually quite easy to navigate. One of the other mandatory pieces of equipment was actually a compass, and I had a compass, and I was carrying this, but I didn't even know how to use it. But it's just, you just had to have it. The navigation for me actually got really difficult on the long stage when it was in the dark, because they put green sort of glow sticks out and they'd have lights for you to follow. But what I was finding is at certain points when I was getting very tired, I'd almost be like, I didn't know which direction I'd be going in, and I'd have to turn my headlight off to try and spot, okay, which is the brightest spot? Where do I need to be aiming towards? And then you sort of find it, okay, that's the direction I need to go in, and off you go. But generally, I mean, I heard of a few people getting lost, but I think that's because what can almost happen is you can get very, if you're following somebody else and the person ahead of you and you're just following their feet, you're not paying attention to your surroundings and you're just zoned out basically, and you're just focusing on moving forward. Then if the person ahead of you hasn't actually got the navigation skills, you can end up just going off track. And I think about a group of about 12 people ended up doing that. And occasionally I'd be going I'd be, on the course, and I'd be thinking, well, that's where we need to go. I don't understand why people were heading off to the right or to the left. And so I was very conscious of just, being comfortable in knowing where I was going, thinking, I think this is the right way. I'm going to take my own path there. And that for me worked out well. I didn't get lost, so it was good.
Yeah, that's good. It's funny when you said about the compass. I remember on one of the ultras I've done, a compass was mandatory, not in addition to like your watch, if you needed like a physical compass as well. And myself and a mate, we ended up just buying like a $1 one off eBay, just so you could tick it off, when there was a gear check.
That's exactly what we did. I did actually ask. There's quite a lot of army people there, so I'd be like, "Oh, sorry, can you just give me a quick refresh on how to use my compass?" And they did show me, and they did, I did practice it before on like the first day, but I just never got to use it.
And at the very start of the race, do they play Highway to Hell?
They do. So it's really, if you go on YouTube and watch anything about Marathon de Sables, you'll see this start line, and it's blown up these massive sort of I don't know how to describe it, big balloons with like Marathon de Sables printed on them, and they have Land Rovers around the edge. And the person who first started the race is a Frenchman called Patrick Bauer, and he climbs up onto the top of the Land Rover, and he's really fantastic at sort of getting the crowd all pumped and excited and getting the adrenaline flowing. And he's talking about the day, what's going to happen, what you're going to come across. And then they start playing this, the AC/DC's Highway to Hell. And it sort of just gets everybody in the right frame of mind. And then it's like the countdown, and then you're off, and you're going through the balloon arches, and you're running along, and they have helicopters swooping down, filming you, and doing flybys. It's really quite an exciting way to start the race.
Yeah, it would have been. And so the first day on that, how did you pull up after the first day?
First day was absolutely fine. Like, it was quite strange because a lot of people basically said, take the first day easy because you've still got this long stage coming up, and it's going to be a punishing, challenging course. And for me, it was all about just getting my bearings. I just wanted to see what it was like and how I was coping, and making sure that I was coping in the heat and all of this. So my first strategy was just really just to take my time, I was going to run all the bits I could run. I was going to walk up the uphills and run sort of the downhills, basically. I wanted to get through the checkpoints as quickly as possible, because what can happen is you can get to a checkpoint and you can stop and you can sit down and you can check your feet and you can do some stretches and have something to eat, and suddenly you've wasted 10 or 15 minutes. And I thought, no, just get through the checkpoints, get in, get my water, get my salt tablets down me, and then just carry on, just focus on keeping on moving, basically. So, the first day, I sort of really enjoyed it, although it was challenging because of the amount of sand dunes we were facing. In my mind, I prepared so much for what it was going to be like in the Sahara that I thought the whole race was going to be sand dunes. And so I was almost ready for that stage. So I quite enjoyed it.
The actual sand dunes, were they a mixture of super soft sand, where your feet would be just sinking into the sand, and were there other sand dunes that were sort of more compact at all?
Yeah, definitely a total mixture between the two. Like, they did have some of these sand dunes were huge, 400 meters, 500 meters going up, and it was soft sand. So my tactic was basically to keep on going and not stop. And it was just step, 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 step. And what you could do is, if you'd had people ahead of you, you'd step into their imprints. And as long as you had sort of a similar stride length, it was actually quite easy to follow up. But everyone sort of had a little bit of different tactics. I saw some people trying to run up the sand dunes, which is, I found that a little bit strange. But I think you're just doing what works for you, basically.
And did you have trekking poles at all?
I didn't know, but I would say there's a high majority of people who do have poles and they do find them very, very useful. I personally didn't want them just because of the weight really and just carrying them. I mean, I do remember one sand dune where it was so big with your backpack on that I was actually having to almost like crawl up it because it was so steep. It was maybe like a 40% gradient. And with your backpack on, you're sort of slightly off balance and you just end up sort of almost crawling like the final sort of 10 meters to the very, very top. So, but all these all these challenges are amazing because once you get to the top and you look down, you're like, wow, I can't believe I've just climbed that and I've got up that. And then the downhills are amazing because you can run the downhills and it is awesome because you sort of slide down. So every time you take a step, the sand will slide you an extra half a meter. And what you actually do with your trainers is you actually have gaiters on your trainers. So you get a shoe person, a cobbler, to sew Velcro all around the bottom of your trainers, and you attach gaiters over the top to stop the sand getting in. So actually, you were very free to run down the sand dunes as quickly as possible. So an awesome experience.
So did your gaiters actually cover not just the ankle part, but the whole fabric, the other fabric of the shoe as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it covered the whole of my shoe, basically.
Yeah, I think the sand getting into your shoes, that'd be probably one of the main things that would force people to pull out, through blisters and possibly just that rubbing, the extreme, almost sandpaper like friction.
Well, it's quite interesting because feet are one of the biggest things in the MDS that you need to look after. So I did a lot of foot preparation. So I was rubbing like knot cream onto my feet to get them all soft and supple. And I'd obviously, I'd actually, when I used to run in the sand in Australia, I actually wouldn't wear my gaiters. So I'd almost try to sort of harden my feet up. So I know it sounds a bit crazy doing soft and supple with the massage, but also just getting used to getting sand in my shoe, because I think there's almost this like psychological thing. You think, oh my goodness, if I get one grain of sand in my shoe, it's going to cause this almighty blister, which isn't the case. But if anybody Googles Marathon de Sables and feet, it's just it's horrendous. I mean, I remember going, they have what's called the dock trotters, who are like the foot doctors, and people are going in there and people's feet are just absolutely destroyed. And one of the other tips that they say is you should get your shoes half a size larger because your feet will end up swelling a little bit in the heat. And so that's what I ended up doing. I actually ended up getting 2 pairs of trainers, one to train in and a brand new pair to race in. So they had more sort of support on the bottom. But I remember going into the dock trotters and the lady was like, oh, but your feet are so pretty. And I was like, oh, I do have blisters. And I had these 3 tiny little blisters on like the left-hand side of my foot. And I had like 2 others. And there was this guy behind me. And he was like, sorry, why are you here again? And I was like, I do have blisters. And he was like, no. I've got blisters. But he turned around and he showed me, he basically almost lost like half the sole of his foot. And it's just amazing. I mean, when you see people, we had one girl in our tent whose feet were complete, all her toes individually wrapped up, all her feet sort of wrapped up, that she couldn't really even get her socks on, and she couldn't really even get her feet into her shoes. So she ended up having to slit her trainers to make more space for her feet because they got so much padding on and they'd swelled so much. So feet is hugely important in MDS, and it's just, to be honest, it's amazing to me how people continue and get through the pain. What I found quite funny is we had a guy in our tent and he just finished the marathon stage. So he came in, he dumped his bag down, sat on the floor on the carpet, took his trainer off, and I was like looking at his foot, and I was like, do you know what you've got in your foot? And he was like, no, what? And he'd actually got a safety pin stuck into the pad of his foot, and he basically run the whole marathon with a safety pin stuck in his foot. But he didn't realize, because he'd had blisters and his foot was bandaged, and he thought it was just the blisters. So he thought, well, there's no point me stopping, there's no point me checking my feet because there's nothing I can do about the blisters. And so he'd run this whole way being in pain for 26, 30 odd miles. And it was just amazing. It was just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's definitely that's pretty full on. I actually saw a video that you published not long after you'd finished. It was on Facebook, and it was like a 5-minute sort of clip. You were actually talking about your foot care, or your approach to how you'd prepared your feet for the MDS. What cream did you use?
So the cream I used was actually not cream, so it's NOK. And what I did was about sort of 2 months before the race, I just basically rub it on my feet every night, give my feet a little bit of a massage. And then for about 2 weeks before the race, I was almost doing that twice a day. So my feet were actually in awesome condition. By the time it actually got to the start of the MDS, they were super soft, they were super supple. They had like certain bits which were sort of hardened, but they weren't so hard that actually it was going to whole bits of my feet were going to come off. But yeah, foot care is so important.
Yeah, I was actually surprised the blisters that you on that clip. You had minimal blisters. It was like relative to what you'd accomplished over that week.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I mean, I'm looking at my feet now actually, and I ended up getting 3 other blisters. So on, say, my right foot at the back around the heel, there was 2 on each side. And the reason for that is sometimes on the sand dunes, you'd be sliding down sideways, and your foot would just be sliding in your shoe. And it was quite weird. I remember thinking, I know I've got a blister, I know it's painful, but I didn't want to stop. And it was just, I had to carry on. This was on the long stage. And then I took this one step and I hit this rock, and I could remember this is so gross, but I remember like my blister popping, and it was this like really intense pain. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, that means my blister's popped. Okay, that's good. Now I can just carry on. And it's amazing how quickly you just get used to it. And you're just like, this becomes normal.
Yeah, there's so many things physically that you're juggling. You're chafing your feet. You might be injured from training, and your backpack's rubbing, and there's all these things that you're constantly juggling in your mind. With the French, I heard that the way they treat blisters is to literally cut the blister off. Is that true?
They used to. So I think basically a couple of years ago, it was horrendous. They basically get a scalpel, they cut the whole of like the top of the blister off, expose the skin underneath, then, wrap it up, bandage it up or whatever. I think now they've actually changed their approach, and they pop the blisters, leave the skin on, iodine and everything else to keep it clean. So they're not as brutal as they were in previous years. Because I think a lot of people used to think, I'm not going to go there because they are too happy with the scalpel. So therefore they manage their feet themselves. But I think this year they've definitely changed that approach, or maybe just learned that actually there's different ways of handling blisters.
Yeah. My tip is I always carry a little tube of super glue. I don't know if you've ever used that.
Haven't.
I haven't had full-on blisters that have stopped me during an ultra. But, just a little small, those $2 ones you can get from the supermarket, just one of those, just carry that. And if you do ever have a full-on blister, halfway or at any point during the ultra, you just literally squirt the super glue onto the blister, and it's just second skin. And then that, it dries pretty much straight away or within a couple of minutes. And then you've basically just got that hard plastic glue, which is effectively second skin, over the blister, and that will get you home. That's awesome. Well, I have heard that's why super glue was actually invented. I know that they use it out in like the Arctic and Antarctic. If you get any sort of cracks in your hands or anything, then they just seal it up with super glue. But that's a great tip. Now, with the at the end of the day, with the tents, were there random campmates every night, or was it the same group of people every night?
So it was the same group of people every night. You got an assigned tent. So we were tent 111. And yeah, so you'd basically either connect with people before you go, or on the coaches as you're driven out to the desert, you'd find sort of your tent mates, etc. And yeah, it's the same people every night. And it's an amazing sort of bonding experience. But the tents aren't like tents that you'd imagine that you'd take camping. It's basically black pieces of cloth which are held up by sticks. And I mean, I still remember on the first or second night, you're just lying there and both sides are sort of open. And there was a sandstorm and the sand's just blowing through the tent. And there's just nothing you can do. You're just lying there. You're trying to eat your food. The sand is just blasting through and you're just constantly getting covered. Yeah. And eventually you speak to like the Moroccan guys. You get to put the like one side of the tent down to stop the sand coming through. But it was very rustic living, very sort of getting back to basics. So all you'd have would be a rug, and that was it on the floor, and that was what you were sleeping on. And I took like this tiny little air mattress, not even a tiny little air mattress, this piece of foam, which is measurably about the size of half a pillow. And that is what I was sleeping on every night. So it's incredibly uncomfortable. You don't sleep that well. And it's just very difficult to get comfortable. And you're also, because there's 8 people in a tent, you're sort of squished all together. And it's quite, it's quite interesting. You get to know your tent mates very well at the end of the day.
Yeah. And what was your main approach at night? Was it as soon as you'd finished for the day and you'd, dropped your bags, in your tent, was your sort of main priority just to rehydrate straight away? Was that your main sort of, like, I'm guessing, rehydrate and recover as much as you could? Was that your main thing in your mind?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I was very good with my water. So I was pretty much always hydrated. You know how you can look at your pee to see how hydrated or not you are? I was always hydrated. So my pee was always very clear. So I didn't really have a problem with the hydration, but I think that's because I was so on it. But after you'd finish a stage, you collect your water. I would head back to the tent straight away. I would take my shoes off. I'd put my legs in the air. I'd make my protein shake. So my recovery drink. So I had a protein shake or protein powder with extra L-glutamine in. I would have that straight away, keep my legs up in the air and just sort of rest for like 10, 15, 20 minutes. I'd then have like a hammer bar or something to eat. And then I'd start cooking or my main meal or my meal for the dinner in the evening, which I wasn't cooking. I was having it cold really because I was saving money. So I didn't have a stove or a heater or anything. So I was just having sort of a cold dinner most evenings. But yeah, then it was just like I was very aware of just keep drinking water and just feeding myself. The other thing that can happen is you can sort of lose your appetite and you don't really want to eat. But so I was quite conscious of making sure that I was trying to replace as many calories as I could. So sometimes I was almost force feeding. I was just like, just keep eating, Sarah, just keep eating, until I got to that stage where I was thinking, right, I think I'm going to be sick if I carry on now. So let's just back off.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that everything is self-sufficient, so you basically have to take everything that you're going to survive on your backpack, and I'm guessing that also includes the food.
It does, and I'm quite interesting. I actually changed my diet maybe about 2 years ago, and I'm basically very low carb, high fat, and sort of very similar to like paleo. And I burn fat when I run now, so I don't have like the gels and I don't have like carbo loading or anything like that. So I actually always run on an empty stomach. And one of my biggest concerns before the race was, well, what am I actually going to be able to eat? Because I looked at a lot of these dehydrated packets of food and some of the contents on them there was rubbish, and there was extra sugar and all of this stuff which I would just never put in my body. It was just so over processed. And I actually found a company over in America called Paleo Foods. Very clean food, very, very simple and very, very good. So that's what I ended up taking along. But the other thing as well is testing your food out. And I thought I'd have been having hammer bars over in Australia, and my favorite one is like this chocolate cashew nut, which is fabulous. But I think what I'd done in my training is whenever I'd gone out, I'd always have that one first, and it would always be amazing and taste great. But I'd never left it for like 7 or 8 hours in the heat. And so actually, when I was out in the desert, I was sometimes getting my chocolate and cashew bar out, and it would all be completely melted and disgusting. But to be honest, you were so hungry, you were just like, I'm going to eat it anyway. But the food is a really interesting one, because it's interesting seeing what other people bring along, because you want to try and balance out the weight of your food, the calories you're getting from it, and the variety of it. So you have to have a minimum of 2,000 calories per day during the race, and that's part of the mandatory kit requirements. And food obviously plays a huge part, I think, even just like psychologically, like having something to look forward to a little later on in the day, knowing, oh well, I've got that to eat later on, so I can't wait till I get to that point, or I'll have that at that checkpoint. And that can help motivate you as well.
Yeah. Just on the food, the low carb, high fat nutrition that you have sort of day to day leading up, or I'm guessing sort of normally, with the low carb, what did you cut back on or eliminate? Was it sort of mainly bread, pasta, rice?
Absolutely.
Sugars?
Well, yes. So I basically, I suffered from something called candida, which is basically almost like a yeast infection, but it can go, everyone's like, oh, it's so disgusting, but it actually affects like all of your body. It can get into your bloodstream. It can go into your brain. It can make you very lethargic, very depressed, make you very tired and run down. And this causes quite a lot of problems. So I had to go 3 weeks with no sugar, which was horrendous, because sugar is in everything, and trying to control that was so difficult. But with the low carb, I don't eat bread anymore. I don't eat pasta. I don't eat white potatoes. I don't have rice. But what I do focus on, so for example, for breakfast, I would have like 4 eggs scrambled. I'd have an avocado and 3 or 4 pieces of bacon with a handful of walnuts. But the week before the race, what I was doing is I was actually eating super clean. So I'd actually be having a piece of chicken for lunch with a salad, a piece of chicken or salmon in the evening with loads and loads of vegetables. So loads of leeks, onions, peas, carrots. I try and stay away from more of the starchy vegetables, but I'd swapped out the white potato for sweet potato. And that for me works incredibly well. But it's something that you've got to train your body for. You can't do it. You've got to give yourself at least 6 months, 9 months to a year to get fat adapted and to be in that keto state where you can actually burn fat instead of the sugars. And it's something that works incredibly well for me. And I think I just don't like the thought of, I just don't see how it can be good for your body to be slamming gels down every 30 minutes. And also with something like the Marathon de Sables, you will actually go into fat burning because you're burning so many calories during the day. So it's always better if you can get your body adapted to it before you even get out there. It's going to make you perform a lot better.
Yeah. Now, was there a particular point during the race that you were in your lowest point, that you really remember that you were struggling physically and mentally? You were at that breaking point. Can you maybe share a time that sort of sticks out for you when you were at that real low point?
It was, and it's just really interesting, is I actually thought it was going to be on the long stage, going out for 52 miles, never having done an ultra. But actually for me, my lowest point was actually on the marathon day, which was really, really weird. I think what it was is I prepared myself so much. So I understood, the first 3 days, take it easy, get through them, save yourself for the long day. It's all about the long day. Because in my mind, well, I'd run marathons before. I can run a marathon. I've got the muscle memory. I can do it. And I actually didn't really think about like the final 2 days. And so for me, the marathon day was actually a real struggle. I got halfway through.
So what day was this?
This would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This would be day 6.
Okay.
Yeah. So after the long day, you have a rest day, and then the day 6 is the marathon day. And I think I just had a sense of humour failure, and I was just going along thinking, this is horrendous. I'm not enjoying this anymore. Why am I here? This is awful. This is a stupid idea. You're in pain. You're hurting. And I started to get really negative, really low, and just really in a funk. And it was just, it was really sort of shocking to me. And I was thinking to myself, Sarah, you still got another 20 odd kilometers to go. You need to snap out of this. And it was a strange low point. And I think it's just because I hadn't mentally prepared for it. And so what I started to do was actually say, right, come on, Sarah, you've made a choice here. You paid a lot of money to do this race. You wanted to push yourself. You wanted to challenge yourself. And you've got to have you've got to have the low points to appreciate the high points. And actually, this is what you need to experience to get stronger. And then I'm a big believer in having gratitude, and that if you can smile at things and be happy about things and you can change your attitude, then actually you can change everything about the situation. So I started to think, okay, we're at this mile. What 10 things can we be grateful for? Okay, it's a beautiful blue sky. The sun is shining. It's nice and hot. You're warm. You're getting a fabulous tan. You've met loads of great people. You ran like 52 miles yesterday. You've only got, you've got half a marathon left, and then you've got a charity stage. You can do this. And as soon as I started being more grateful and I changed my attitude, my whole posture changed, and I was getting stronger as I was running, and it just made me feel better about what I was doing.
Oh, that's good. Real good. And whereabouts do you draw your inspiration from?
In terms of what inspiration, what type of?
Like, just to continue going, to continue moving forward, throughout the day. And is there anything, do you sort of draw on inspiration from your friends or your family, or do you have a particular song that you try and draw inspiration from? Is there anything that sticks out for you that you can, or like a mantra? Is there anything?
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, absolutely. Like on the long day, I got to about 32 miles or something, and it was starting to go dark, and I was sort of, doing the Sahara shuffle, and I was heading along, and I was making progress, and it was quite interesting. I got this like massive second wind from somewhere. I have no idea where it came from, but what I could imagine is that because we were being tracked, I could imagine myself as this little blue dot on a computer screen, and I could imagine my friends and my family looking at the computer and seeing me. And I could see people ahead of me, like, 2 people ahead of me or another person ahead of them. And I was thinking, if I was back at home right now and I was running a race, I know that my parents would be shouting to me, "Go on, Sarah, you can do this. Go on, go for it." And I'd be thinking, okay, well, let's give them something to watch. And I really felt that all my friends and family and all my supporters in the Tough Girl tribe were there cheering me on. And so I'd spot 2 people ahead of me, and I'm thinking, right, that's where I'm going to get to. I'm going to overtake those 2. And I'd run along. I had my music playing, really cheesy songs, lots of, Justin Bieber and Beyonce and Britney and all these other sorts of tunes. And I'd run along, I'd overtake the 2 people. And I'd be thinking, right, what's next? Okay, 1 more person ahead of me. Okay, let's go for it. Let's get there. I mean, the other thing that happened to me is I found at some points I would start to slow down. So say I was running, and then it would change to a Sahara shuffle, and then it would change to like a fast walk, and then it would change to a slow walk, and then it would change to like a plod. And I was just getting slower and slower and slower the more tired I got. And I was actually thinking to myself, Sarah, if you continue at this pace, it's going to take you forever to get back. You've got to keep moving, and you've got to keep moving at pace. You've got to put one step in front of the other. And I remember saying to myself, just to get my rhythm going, step, 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 just to try and speed myself up and to keep me going, really. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was all about just wanting to do it, just wanting to prove a point, not necessarily to anybody else, but to me. And I was thinking at one point, Sarah, this is why you did this training. This is why you spent those hours on your feet, running in the sand, running in St. Kilda, is so that you could do this. And I actually trained with a heart rate monitor. So, and I had my watch on when I was over there, and I could see my heart rate. And I'd say, your heart, it's not even you're not even at your highest level. You can still push this. You can keep going. You know you can, because look at your heart rate. Your heart's telling you you're not working that hard, which was which I found incredibly motivating, because I'd be like, okay, let's see what the heart rate says. Okay, I'm only at 134. Let's go for it. And I found that was a great way to keep me motivated and to keep me moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never really, I've sort of run with a heart rate monitor a couple times, but I don't normally wear one. I just sort of find it uncomfortable. But when you were sort of talking before about, your pace would slow, you'd be in a rhythm and then you'd sort of slow and then slower and slower and slower. That sort of sounds like, the dreaded death march, when you sort of just spiral downwards out of control.
Absolutely. And you've got to get out of it. But it was interesting because I could see like my cadence, and I'd be like, oh, okay, it's not 120, 118, 110, 105. It's like, right, Sarah, get this up. Come on, get this up.
And what were you going through when you saw the finish line? You were maybe, you could see it like a kilometre away. What were you sort of feeling at that point?
Well, what was interesting is that it's actually quite a bit of a psychological battle. So on the long stage, which was day 4, you could see the finish line ahead of you, and it looked so, so close. It just looked as though you could touch it, you could reach out and touch it. And if you weren't aware of how far the distance was, you'd be thinking, oh, I could get there in 20 minutes, half an hour, that's maximum. But it was actually like 2 hours away. And that is a real challenge, being able to see something, working the way, towards it, but actually seemingly never making any progress. And I always get really emotional at these things. And especially when I was coming in on the long stage, it was amazing, because I'd never put my body in that position before. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to accomplish it, and getting there and seeing the webcam and blowing kisses. And I was on this like massive high, like the adrenaline rush was awesome. And I remember thinking to myself, I could carry on. I could keep going. I feel on top of the world. But seeing that finish line is always, I don't know. I think it's for something that you've worked so hard towards, something that you've trained towards, something that you've dedicated, 12 months of your life towards. And you finally get there and you're crossing over it and you finish it. It's, there is that immediate high, but then there's also that sort of that low, which I experience is like, well, oh, what next? Which is almost like instantaneously. It's like, okay, you've done this, right? Great, well done, Sarah. It's almost like I don't give myself enough praise for doing it.
But it's also you get a sense of satisfaction that not only have you completed one of the toughest foot races on earth, but your journey actually started 18 months prior to getting to the start line. And it's that satisfaction that you've battled through the ups and downs throughout, your training and having to sacrifice going out, being strict with your diet and your training and stuff like that. You do have that sense of satisfaction that it stays with you forever,
Absolutely.
Moving forward. And what sort of is there a main takeaway that you learn about yourself by completing the Marathon de Sables?
Oh, it's such a great question. I think the main thing that I learned was actually about not being overwhelmed by big, scary challenges. And actually, sometimes you have to get uncomfortable if you want to grow and develop as a person. And when you get outside of your comfort zone and you do something that scares you, you have to go through that uncomfortable stage. You've got to get comfortable getting uncomfortable. And I think one of the key learnings for me was actually about breaking it down. And it's not necessarily thinking about the whole goal in its entirety. It's about breaking it down to that day, to that checkpoint, to the next mile, to the next step, whatever you need to break it down to. And if you can break it down into small enough goals so that you can just keep on making progress, you can achieve the big goal at the end of the day. And that for me, I think is really a very powerful thing, because I think sometimes you want to achieve so much and it can just be so scary, it can be paralyzing. Whereas actually now I know, actually, what do you want to achieve, Sarah? Why is it important? Okay, if it's still scaring you, you need to break it down even further. It's still scaring you, break it down even further. Make it as small and as easy as possible and just keep taking one step at a time in order to get to your goal.
Yeah, that approach applies to anything in life. I just wanted to ask, I try and ask every guest these questions. And the first one's around success. Who's the first person that comes to mind when you hear the word successful, and why?
Oh my goodness, that is a great question. Do you know, I'm not even sure I have an answer, because I think success means so many different things to so many people. And I think people put these tick boxes, or society says, right, to be successful, you have got to be rich, live in a nice house. You know, is it fame? Is it driving nice cars? Is it going on 3 holidays a year? Whereas for other people, success is about being happy and being healthy. So I don't think there's a single person who I think is successful without knowing what their definition of success is, because you could actually have somebody who's got, seemingly to the outside world, everything going for them, but actually they may not be happy in themselves in what they've done. So are they a success? And it's almost like, well, no, they're not. Then you could look at somebody else and thinking, oh dear, you know, they don't have any of the material things in life, but actually, are they successful? Well, it depends what their goals are. Do they want to be happy, healthy? Do they want to spend, you know, time with their family, and they're doing those things? And absolutely, they are successful. So I think success is a really personal definition. And I think if people can look away from what society puts on them to make, you know, to have that, what am I trying to say? If you can put away what society's pressures on you to be successful, and you can really find out what it means to you to be successful, then I think that's the most important thing.
Now, if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Sarah Williams and give her some advice, what would you tell her?
Oh, I would tell her, Sarah, don't listen to other people. Don't follow other people's pathways. Don't be scared of what other people think of you. This is your life. You have one life and you have got to live it. And you know what? You should go out and follow your dreams. Just because they are not necessarily normal and people may think you're crazy for wanting to do it, go and do it. And don't worry about what other people think of you. Their opinions don't matter at the end of the day.
And whereabouts can people find you online?
They can come and check out the website, so toughgirlchallenges.com. I'm also on Twitter at _tough_girl, all in capitals. I have an awesome Facebook page. I post loads of photos on my Instagram, which is at toughgirlchallenges. So any of those places, they'll be able to find me.
Yeah, you've done heaps of stuff as well. We haven't even mentioned your books. You're an author as well.
I am, and I'm writing my 3rd book at the moment, which is all about the Marathon de Sables. But I've written, so I wrote 2 other books, one on climbing Kilimanjaro, so tips for the top, so loads of information if you want to take on that challenge. And then I actually spent 6 months chalet hosting, which was incredible. And so I wrote loads of advice and loads of top tips as well for if you want to become a chalet host and go and work in the mountains. And then my 3rd book is going to be all about the Marathon de Sables, but it's not just going to be about my experience. It's also going to be speaking with other experts, and I'll be linking in a podcast with it and speaking to various people and sharing their top tips and advice. It'll be a massive, loads of information book. Well, that's the plan anyway.
Did we touch on your podcast as well?
I don't think we have, but I'd love to give a quick shout out. Well, I started the Tough Girl podcast because I wanted to get more women out there in the media as role models, because I think there are so many female explorers, so many athletes, so many adventurers, and they just don't get the exposure or the media opportunities and the sponsorship that they need. So my podcast, I interview women, and I interview women from all around the world who've taken on awesome challenges, whether that's running their first marathon, whether that's swimming the English Channel, whether that's climbing mountains like Mount Everest. And it's about sharing their stories, and it's about understanding why they did what they did, how they found it, what they learned from it. understanding failures that they've dealt with in their lives, what they've learned from those challenging situations. Not so it's to make other women feel bad that they're maybe not out there doing crazy things like the Marathon de Sables or, crossing the Antarctica or the Arctic, but getting them to think about, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to do a 5K? Do I want to progress in my career? Do I want to progress in other areas of my life? And getting them to believe in themselves that actually they can do it. If they've got the confidence to go out and try, then they can go out and achieve their dreams. So I love the podcast. I interview some incredible women. It's called the Tough Girl Podcast. So it's available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. And trust me, if you listen to this podcast in the morning, you are going to be so motivated for like the rest of the day. You're going to be absolutely pumped.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll put all the links in the show notes.
Oh, that would be great.
You're one tough girl.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on to the Born to Kick Arse podcast. You're super inspiring. And before you go, is there one piece of advice that you could give someone who wants to get to the start line of the Marathon de Sables? What is there one tip that you could share with someone that potentially wants to run that race?
Go for it. And I'd say, so there's a quote, I can't remember who it's by, but it says, one important key to success is self-confidence. An important key to self-confidence is preparation. Whatever you want to do, if it's the Marathon de Sables, you've got to get prepared. Do your research, prepare your feet, prepare your training plan, prepare your body, prepare your mind, prepare your nutrition, prepare your hydration. Preparation is so, so important for this race. So the key to success is self-confidence, and an important key to self-confidence is knowing that you have put in the work that you need to do to achieve that goal. But the key thing is, if you want to do anything, take the first step.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks again, Sarah, for coming on. And I look forward to all your future adventures. And yeah, good luck with everything.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed being on the podcast.
Cheers.
You're welcome.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard and catch you next time.